Hello and welcome to Geordie Leather. Today's episode was meant to be about buckles, but I've just checked my stock and realised I haven't got any, so buckles another day. So today we're going to cover the topic of skiving leather. Skiving leather basically means to thin down leather with a sharp tool so that it's easier to connect to other pieces of leather without making them too thick. To give you some examples, let's have a look. Let's take some bits of leather. Let's just take all the same colour, just keep things even. So we were to take these two bits of leather and try and fix them together. You can see that obviously doubles the thickness of the leather, which isn't a problem for most cases, but certain times, such as for example in wallets, you want to thin down one of the pieces of leather so that it doesn't get too chunky and bulky in your pocket. Otherwise, for example with a wallet, you have multiple layers of leather, one layer for each sleeve of a card holder. So you could end up having 5 or 6 layers of leather when stacked together become really thick and bulky, which you don't want in a wallet. You want to keep it as thin as possible. So we skive areas of the leather where they come together to reduce that thickness. So we'll show you the process of skiving leather next. So there are various methods, various tools and methods for skiving leather. It basically falls into 2 categories. You can skive leather with a machine, or you can skive leather with hand tools. Now, because this is a basic tutorial, I assume most of you won't have a skiving machine. I will show you a skiving machine in a later episode, but for now we'll stick to skiving leather by hand. So let's have a look at some of the tools you can skive leather with. If you want to go down the traditional route of using traditional tools, there are various knives, French knives, skiving knives, which you can use, but again they're quite expensive and I wouldn't expect most beginners to have access to such things unless you've got plenty of money, of course, in which case, can I borrow a £5? Anyway, so for beginners, the sort of tools you would use are the sort of things you would buy on Amazon, eBay and from China. So I'll show you a few of those. So here, let's just zoom in on the overhead cam so we can see these a bit better. These are 3 very popular skiving tools which are easily available on Amazon, eBay and China, etc. So this one is a skiving tool. I'm not particularly fond of this particular one myself, but I'll show you how to use it. It's basically a razor blade which is held in a holder. You can see very carefully the blade here. It's very sharp, so be careful. Notice the elastoplast from preparing for this video, so be careful with skiving knives. They are by nature very sharp. So this particular one bends the blade so it forms a crescent which digs into the leather when you pull it across it. So we'll show you the use of that in a moment. Another very popular one is this design here. This is my preferred favourite design. It's very cheap, almost to the point of being disposable. It's just a simple metal holder which holds a curved razor blade. This is a lot wider than this particular one, so I find it's just my preferred choice. Everyone's got different ideas, but I like this one. Another one, a very good one, I keep it in a leather little case because it is very sharp, and I did cut myself earlier honing it. So it's basically a cheap version of a French skiving knife. So it's a blade with a very finely polished and ground edge, which if you keep honed with a leather strop, which we'll cover in the later video on sharpening tools, this is really a nice tool to use. This is just a little box of blades that comes with this particular skiving knife. So let's do some skiving. So like I say, skiving basically means to thin leather. So we take some scraps of leather. It's a good example. Let's say we wanted to make a belt loop with this particular piece of leather here. Now, a belt loop, as you're probably familiar with, is just a loop of leather which is folded round and fixed together by some means, often stitched or stapled or riveted. So that is a belt loop, but you can see the problem there. Let's use this side bench cam. You can see when those two pieces of leather overlap, it makes the piece where they overlap quite thick, which is not ideal. So we're going to skive this little area here on both ends, so that when you bring those together, it'll be the same thickness as the rest of the leather. So to do that, what I like to do is just to roughly mark with a pencil or whatever the area you want to skive. So it's going to be this area here, which when you fold over is going to join onto that area there, so same sort of distance. So we're going to thin down the leather at this point, and we're going to thin down the leather at this point, so when they're folded together and overlap, they'll be the same thickness. Okay, so let's do the first half with my preferred tool. Now, one thing to bear in mind, because this is a curved blade and you're going to be pulling against the leather, you're going to dig it into your bench, and even with a cutting mat it will get damaged. So what I suggest you do is you use a hard surface, either, if you've got one, a marble block, or if you haven't, a simple glass plate like this, toughened glass. Put that on your bench to protect the surface before you start skiving, because you will slip and you'll dig that very sharp blade into your cutting mat and it will be destroyed. So so for this piece here, we're going to use this curved blade, and I'll zoom in so you can get a better view of this. Okay, so if you can see what I'm doing here, I'm holding the piece of leather with one hand. I'm putting the center of the curve of the blade where I want to start the skive, just pressing, just pulling it towards me, and you can see how that is starting to, it's not a very sharp blade obviously, but if you, rather than pull, you sort of slice so the blade actually cuts rather than drags. That tends to work better. So there we go. So slice, and you can see what's happening already. We bring this up to the camera, you can see that it's starting to thin down the leather to a taper. Now that's what we want. So let's do a little bit more on that side. So if we check both sides so that they're roughly even, see it's slightly thicker on this side, so I'll take a bit more off that side. So this is what we're looking for. This is a skived piece of leather. See, the camera will focus on that. Right, okay, there we go. So you can see it's tapered to a point. So we're going to do the same on the other side. So we'll turn this around and we use the same tool to do exactly the same thing. So roughly where your pencil line is, press the blade, pull towards you but also slightly to the side, and you see that slices the leather nicely. So be very careful with these, because these are basically razor blades and they will cut not only leather but skin very easily, so be careful. So we're going to repeat that process, just skiving that piece of leather down until it's thinned, approximately the same. Let's have a look at that. So we got, okay, and the other side's about the same. So you can see, I'll just zoom out slightly. Or if I use the bench cam, it's probably better. When this is now folded, so that surface there is going to press against that surface there. So we fold this, and when those skived ends are brought together, you can see now that the thickness of the overlap, let's get nice and tight so you can see it, is basically the same as the rest of the leather. So you wouldn't know there's a joint there. So when that's glued, stitched, riveted, stapled, however you want to fasten it, you won't basically see the joint. So that's a very good way of joining pieces of leather without a thick overlap. So let's do it again, but with a different tool this time. So we'll have a go with this one. So I'm not very fond of this. I don't use it very often, but I'll demonstrate it anyway because people will buy these things. So it's the same principle. We take the tool, but instead of holding it sideways, we drag the tool towards us. So position the edge of the blade, which is here, where you want to start your skive, and then just angle it until the blade is starting to dig into the leather, and then just pull back. As you can see, it's done quite a good job. So it's the same principle. You will tend to find that the end can become raggy, but that's not a problem. You just trim that with a knife. So you can see again on the side camera, that's thinned down the leather. So it's the same principle. We'll quickly do the other side on the reverse, just to repeat it with the same tool. Like I say, not my preferred tool, so everyone has their preferences, and I don't like this very much, but it does the job. So if you get a raggy edge, just take the knife and trim it back. It's not important. Use a sharper knife. You can do the same with that side. So even though this is obviously not an even piece of leather, the principle is the same. When you bring them together, the joint will be the same thickness. Obviously when it's glued, you see that's a lot better, but that's the principle. You can see the joined area is the same thickness as the rest of the leather that's been joined. So one more time, this time we'll use one of my more preferred tools, and that's the more traditional but still quite modern skiving knife. So one of the benefits of this is that, unlike the other tools where you're pulling the blade towards you, with this you're generally pushing the blade away from you, so it's slightly safer, but at the same time it's also very sharp blade. So just find a piece of scrap I haven't used. Here we go. So same principle, but this time, if we'd say we're doing it here, we would hold your piece of leather, and again, you're not just pushing it forward, you're trying to slice it as you would with a knife. So it's a slight slicing action. You can see this gives a nice controlled slice. Do the same again. So to show you that again, maybe a bit more off that one, just to pare it down slightly more. So it's a slicing action as well as a pushing action. That gives you a nice clean taper. That's a lot better, isn't it? So there we have a nicely skived piece of leather. We'll quickly do the other side just to, maybe it's more visible on the black side, so we'll slice like so. So although this requires regular sharpening, it probably is the better of the three tools, particularly for a beginner, because it gives you a lot more control and it is a lot safer. So if you haven't got one, treat yourself to one. They're fairly cheap. So both ends are now skived, so we'll bring those two together. And again, you can see that when they're glued together, you've got a nice even thickness of leather all the way around the piece. So Other applications of skiving, as I've said, when you want to bring two pieces of leather together or multiple layers of leather together, you can skive the edges so that they're not as thick. I think that's basically it. There isn't a lot more to say about skiving. It's a fairly simple process, as you've seen. The more you do it, the more obviously you get used to it, and the better job you do. Initially you may find it a bit tricky, but practice, as with all skills, is what's needed, and you'll get better. So that's it for skiving. Okay, so that covers the topic of skiving leather. We will cover the buckles episode in a few videos time once they turn up from Amazon. But for now, if you have any questions about skiving, please leave a comment in the comments below. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Please click the like button. It does help to rank the video and let other people see it. If you want to subscribe, that would be brilliant. And if you are one of our patrons, thank you very much. If you'd like to be a patron, please click our Patreon link in the description box below. Thanks now. Bye-bye.